Sonic is so back. By having a new game without Sonic as the main selling point. And honestly, I couldn't really be happier with it. I've been a Sonic fan for a really long time now, since I was in elementary school, in fact. And when I say Sonic fan, I mean I was the exact mega nerd you probably knew in middle school who spent all their time talking about Sonic and drawing their little OCs in the margins of their school papers. And as any good longtime Sonic fan will tell you, a lot of the appeal from the series comes from the vast swath of characters that make up the Sonic universe, for better and for worse. I always loved getting to see which characters were going to become playable in the new releases, such as Tails and Knuckles coming back as solo characters in the ports of the classic 2D Sonic games, the team system and heroes that brought back forgotten characters such as the Chaotix, and everyone back as solo characters and new characters as playable in Sonic 06.
It's no use!
Unfortunately, 06 was the last game for a really long time that Sega put in new characters, instead focusing on solidifying the base 3D Sonic gameplay, and adding in new gimmicks along the way, such as the Werehog transformation and Wisp from Unleashed in Colors, my beloved. There wasn't really a new Sonic game with a new non-Sonic character between 06 and Forces, if you don't count the Boom games like a normal person would. I honestly can't blame Sega for the most part for taking a step back with the playable character roster after 06 due to how poorly that game was received. And I'm pretty sure programming in 9 characters is rough on development time, so focusing on Sonic gameplay alone really does make the most sense to me. However, we've never been so f***ing back.
Oh my gosh, this is so freaking epic!
Shadow Generations has been one of the best Sonic games in recent memories to me, by far. Although, in fairness, I didn't really play Forces or Frontiers because I thought they looked icky. But it does still have some of the usual Sonic warts, but I've just come to live with those at this point. Things like unpredictable level design, anime writing. I don't like the voice actors because I didn't grow up with them, to be honest. And for the purposes of this video, the game shows that Sega can still make a game based on a side character with little involvement from Sonic himself, while also keeping the writing good and paying respect to the character's original history. Shadow's definitely a character who deserves a game like this, that looks at his assorted history and confusing storyline and questionable decisions while wrapping them all up into a nice bow. This makes me happy and all, but as a Sonic fan, I must now start dreaming of doing this, but for the rest of the Sonic cast. And to be fully honest here, I do think there are a couple of characters who I think could benefit from having a game like this of their own. They could even play on that character's own personality or general narrative role, because the 3 characters I have in mind here, they all have natural reasons to be more, not like isolated, but more stand out as individuals and not need Sonic so much to be part of their story. And the 3 characters I have in mind are Knuckles, Silver, and Metal Sonic. Because all 3 of those really have a lot of potential for unique gameplay and narratives to step away from the shadow of Sonic himself. And yes, this is the start of my pitch of 3 autistic fantasy games that I really wish would come into existence, but I have no actual programming skills, and all I can do is draw funny characters on the internet. So this is the best I can come up with. But I hope you enjoy them as we hop into 3 hypothetical Sonic games starring 3 side characters, dissecting what their gameplay would be like and whatever possible narratives we can have for these games. So for our first one, let's just go ahead and start off with our main man, Knuckles.
Knock, knock, it's Knuckles. Oh no.
Alright, now 2 things before heading too far off into the video. First of all, my throat's a bit sore while recording this, so please bear with me if I sound a little rough at times, or a little gruff maybe even. And second of all, I don't want to stray too far from the standard Sonic gameplay that we've come to expect from the 3D Sonic games at this point. So I'm going to try to keep it pretty base level, although I will be adding more unique elements. It'll mostly be like Sonic with gimmicks to a degree, although I feel like I've kind of went out of my way to make it a little bit different instead. I don't know. You'll be the judge. Just let me know what you think of these as we go along, and I'd be happy to hear your feedback in the comments below. So, in respects to keeping these games similar enough to base Sonic, just assume whenever I'm talking about these characters, they'll have their spin jump homing attack, boosts, and all that. I'll get into the controls as we go throughout. Also, throughout my narration for this, I'll be describing these hypothetical control schemes with a base on the normal like Nintendo button layout, something you see on like the Switch or whatever. It's just what I'm most familiar with, so that's just what I worked everything around. But you can easily convert it into any other kind of control scheme in your head if you really want to, just by looking at the layout. Now, actually getting into it, Knuckles is really interesting because he's really the first real rival that Sonic ever faced. Metal Sonic was more just a mini boss in CD, in my opinion. He's fairly different from Sonic in gameplay, personality, and motivations. While he's always been a speedy, fast-talking free spirit, Knuckles is always a physically and spiritually strong, honor-bound champion for his homeland, which I don't think too many of the games focus on after his first appearance, or really take advantage of, except for having him begrudgingly have to leave his island to find the Master Emerald shards or fight other threats to the world with Sonic and the others. He also stands alone from the rest of the cast as being the best suited character for close range combat and exploration, as seen in small parts of his multiple appearances. Due to this, I think Knuckles' game would best be suited as a kind of character action adventure game, although still keeping as a standard platformer, obviously. Now, I wouldn't want to go full hog with the action aspect as much as a game like Devil May Cry would. Something more akin to Ratchet and Clank would do much better for the base Sonic format, I think. In this respect, I would like to include like a really fun combo system, because I just think it would be a really cool way of replacing the normal importance, the level scores based on the time you beat a stage. So now, instead of just beating it quickly, you can also beat it while destroying the most enemies as stylishly as possible. Now, to get into the real meat and potatoes of the combat, I think keeping the melee attacks simple would be best, so an auto combo with the X button and a heavy attack with A would play really well to the simple controls of the franchise. Also, a better fit for the action focus of the game, having enemies with health bars would probably help the most, so instead of just hitting something once and it dies, bringing back health bars like in Sonic Heroes. Plus, I think there's a lot of potential from mixing the action combat focus with the normal platformer elements. So imagine going from a homing attack into a combo to quickly dispatch a larger enemy, or launching an enemy airborne for a homing attack to reach higher platforms. I just think this would be an absolutely perfect way of mixing the combat with the level design of the series. And now for the adventure aspects of the game, there are plenty of abilities Knuckles has shown that would apply really well for exploring a 3D space. Starting with his strength, he can use it to knock open doors, smash boulders, and push heavy level objects around. To make this more interesting than just the basic boost to smash, I'd love to have the boost only destroy small enemies, and to smash doors and boulders and larger enemies, Knuckles would actually have to stop and use his attacks to break them. Given the shift away from speed-based gameplay, I think this would be a reasonable change. Next, we have his glide and digging, which are going to be the main bread and butter that makes up the game. I think it's going to be a great way to make it stand out from normal Sonic games. Starting off with the gliding mechanic, I think it can work similarly to how it did previously, as a state where you enter after a jump where you can slowly fly forward while still losing altitude over time. This would be best activated with a separate button from the jump, just to make the homing attack and gliding easy to differentiate on a fly, instead of just relying on the homing attack reticle. So for our control model, let's just set Y as the designated glide button while in the air, and B as the jump homing attack button. Also, I think Knuckles' climbing ability being tied to his glide, like it normally does, would make the most sense with him just gliding onto a surface, then beginning to climb it. It just keeps it nice and simple. And for digging, it was a little harder, honestly, to figure out how to make this work best in a 3D setting, so please bear with my description. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. I decided to have ZL, the left trigger, be the digging button, but require you to hold it, and when you release it, you'll resurface in a skyward uppercut that'll also propel you upwards a little bit. I figure this is the best way to mix the traversal and combat potential of the digging into one move while still keeping it easy to understand, because Sonic is still ultimately like a kid's game. Now, this might also come up in a discussion of level design, but I'm debating having the digging be 2D from the top down, or having Knuckles move in full 3D while digging, similar to swimming in 3D Sonic games. I'll have to see how I feel during level design phase, but I'm not entirely sure. This is a big can of worms. I imagine it could be pretty similar to like the drill mechanic in Sonic Colors with the drill wisp. Although, uh, also as general coverage, I'd keep swimming the same as it normally is and allow Knuckles to use his boost while in the digging or gliding states, just to keep the speed up because it is still a Sonic game after all. But I would have the dash speed you up less while gliding, just to keep it more fair. And to round out the rest of the controls, I just keep right trigger as the boost button and right and left bumpers as quick step functions because they are brilliant for Sonic design whenever you're just going a million miles a fucking hour. Alright, now with all the boring control stuff out of the way, I'd like to jump into the actual point of why I make these videos, is that my stupid little Sonic zoomer brain will not let me stop zooming, and my fanfiction will become reality now. And you all have to sit through it. So I hope you enjoy! Starting off for all three of these fanfic games, we'll have to establish why the other characters don't intervene with the plot. Knuckles is a really tricky one for this because he's one of the characters with the closest relationships. But I think I have a story that could play into his character strengths and limitations. Firstly, to keep this game very Knuckles-centric, I think keeping it solely on Angel Island would work to make Knuckles the star of the show, since I can see his pride stopping him from asking for any kind of help when trouble befalls his homeland. Plus, Angel Island is a very diverse locale with a lot of the Sonic series staples. Grassy rolling hills, ancient ruins, sandy deserts, and water to drown in. However, I'd also like to see some new locations that could possibly play on the lore of the island, like ruins from the Echidnic land, the Chow and their natural habitat, and some hints to Chaos and his legend. I also want to state that for all three of these games, I want to try to avoid making new characters as much as I can, because for one, it's more interesting this way, and for another, this is a good way to use established but underutilized villains. Now, with all these conditions I've set for myself out of the way, I have to ask, who would prove a threat to Angel Island, where it would isolate itself to only Angel Island? After looking back through the previous films from the games, I honestly think the Deadly Six from Sonic Lost World would just make the most sense and be the most interesting villains for this game. My first point of interest for them as antagonists here is the similarities between Angel Island and the Lost Hex as floating landscapes that are dotted with varied environments. The second point being that the Zeti have been fairly useless since Lost World, mostly because they're kind of boring, and I still think there's some latent potential there to tap on. I can also see their motivation relating to their homeland and the Master Emerald, since they don't have a natural power source similar to it. For basic setup, we can just say they learned that they could use the conch thing from Sonic Lost Worlds backwards to control the Lost Hex and move each fragment to their liking instead of them being controlled by it. So it's kind of like a reverse effect, which just a fun way of playing on that. This could be a good excuse for keeping Angel Island cut off from the rest of the world and adding new details to the stages by having each hex float around the island, kind of encasing it like a shell almost, or a Dyson sphere to a degree, absorbing the energy of the Master Emerald, and having each hex be like a new platform in a previous location. And you may even be able to do a thing where you have hexes from contrasting environments placed around Angel Island. So, desert areas in Mushroom Hills, or something like that, for instance. Just a fun example. After invading the island, I'd imagine they'd quickly set upon the Master Emerald and divide it amongst themselves, just to make them more powerful, I guess, to a degree. And this is going to be our lore reason for why their boss fights are going to be a lot different than Lost World, because I really want them to be able to fight on their own more and less have to rely on robots and just stage gimmicks and whatnot. I feel like it'd be much more interesting to give them like actual, not like full-on chaos powers, but like some light stuff like Chaos Sphere and stuff like that, or Chaos Spear and stuff like that. Plus, I think it would make them a greater threat for the narrative and for the player, because we kind of see them in a more powerful sense. They have more energy to use, and they have a lot more potential to do more damage. Whereas before, they were kind of just guys. I think they're like maybe a little bit stronger than normal people, but not shown to be very much. And much like Sonic games before, this is also going to be our reason for why Knuckles has to individually fight them off one by one, as the Zeti have broken up the Master Emerald and have split themselves each to different areas and vistas of Angel Island that they control now, and Knuckles is just going to have to fight them off one by one. And that's our plot for the game, I guess. And I'm not going to get into much in the in between because I feel like a lot of it writes itself, and it's better just to leave it for your imagination. I feel like it's more creative and fun that way. But the climax could be a fun final battle with Zavok, and honestly, I'm saying this as a self-indulgent Sonic fan and just desperately wanting this, but I'd love to see Hyper Knuckles return for this fight and maybe have as an unlockable transformation for the normal stages afterwards. We haven't seen him so long, and I love Super Form so much. It's such a fun part of the game. I like Dragon Ball Z, and I like when the characters change to funny colors. And that's all I'm asking for. Please, Sega, please add in funny colors to the game again. Please. Now, getting a little bit back more into the story, I can honestly see a lot of thematic potential with this setup too. Knuckles is a person deeply driven to protect his ancestral homeland at all costs. He's so dedicated to that up until Sonic Heroes, where they kind of left this aspect in the wayside, it was hard to get Knuckles involved in the plot unless it had something to do with the Master Emerald or Angel Island. Zavok, on the other hand, from his one main story appearance, can just seem like a naturally evil character, but I feel like there's a lot more to him from the little tidbits and cutscenes we get. Take this diatribe with a large grain of salt, but I see Zavok as a very narcissistic but nationalistic kind of character. While he's shown to be very wrathful and angry, he's also seen having a great deal of respect for Zik, who trained him. I also see him using world domination, quote unquote, as a means to ensure the survival of his people, the Zeti. There are only 6 known Zeti characters, excluding the fat one's mom. That's just an offhanded joke to the wiki list for some reason. So I could definitely see this as being a plausible reason for his actions, even scolding and manipulating his own team if it fits his end goals. Now, I'll be honest, this is a lot of headcanon for a silly what-if fan game idea, but I do really think there's some grounds for a unique story about different peoples clashing for the sake of the preservation of themselves, even if it is still just a simple Sonic game at the end of the day. Now, to finally wrap up this Knuckles segment of the video, I want to say I didn't want to go too far into the individual level designs for these, mostly so I can keep it at a reasonable length and save myself from some sanity there. But for each major location, I think it'd be best to just keep up with the type of zones we've already seen each of the Deadly Six stick to. So, Zaz in Mushroom Hill, Zamam in Sinopolis, Zik in Azure Lake, Xena in Ice Cap, Zor in Endless Mine, and breaking the pattern for the final boss, Zavok around the Master Emerald Altar or Sky Sanctuary. Also, to again support the narrative, I think having Knuckles blasted away from the Master Emerald Altar to Mushroom Hill as a true starting area would help to justify Knuckles needing to slowly get back the Master Emerald. I think that's all I have to say for our Knuckles action/adventure game. Now, with all that being said, I'd like to move on to a pretty controversial character that I think deserves his own game, especially after his first one crashed and burned so goddamn hard. Silver the Hedgehog.
It's no use! Whoa!
Now, Silver. Poor little Trunks pastiche. You never stood a chance. I find Silver really cool as a character due to his time travel gimmick and psychic abilities, but unfortunately, that's the same reason why he's such a fucking mess of a character. I'm sure most of you are aware of the difficulties that the time travel plot can introduce to any larger narrative. So that's our narrative issue to solve. However, he also has his psychic abilities, which causes an issue for figuring out how to make him work as a more speedy platformer character. Luckily for me and you, I just established a format of dividing gameplay and narrative discussion in different sections. So we'll break it up as such, starting with the gameplay discussion. Alright, gameplay is the part I was, honest to God, dreading the most. Because for Silver, if you've played his only appearance in a mainline Sonic game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. From what I remember about, little behind-the-scenes trivia stuff here and there, his psychic abilities were originally made to show off the physics engines of 06, which I think is probably a huge mistake given the fast-paced nature of most Sonic games. So for Silver, I mostly wanted to focus on a middle ground for the high-speed action and more slower paced psychic platforming. In this respect, I'm keeping B as a jump button and homing attack, the same as before, using A as a slide and stomp, right trigger as a boost, and both bumpers as quick steps. Now, the rest of the controls are going to be a mix of new and old concepts remapped for ease of play with the new gimmick for Silver's style. I propose having Silver use the boost gauge as a stamina bar as well as a boost resource. I figured this would be a good way of challenging the player to choose between finishing a level quickly or precisely. For his other basic moves, I think bringing back his levitate map to Y would give him some more precise mid-air movement and allow players to course correct more freely. And for a new attack, kinda, Psycho Knife from Generations mapped to X would make for a good long-range attack option, and could switch from the horizontal slice while in 3D sections to the vertical slice in 2D sections. I can imagine this knife being useful for pushing buttons and switches at long range, and could make for some interesting puzzle designs similar to Shadow's Chaos Spears in Shadow Generations. To incorporate the more typical use for psychic powers in this moveset, I think we could bring back the Psychokinesis ability from 06, but slightly changed. I envision this working by having all enemies and physics objects within a small area around Silver continuously raising off the ground as long as you hold the left trigger, and have boost gauge to use as a resource. The floating objects will remain in air until your boost gauge runs out, or if you release the ability by releasing the left trigger. After the ability ends, all objects fall and enemies are destroyed if they fall from a great enough height. I 100% see this ability being the main bread and butter of the puzzle design for this game, and while it does sound like it could be a bit much to keep up with, I think it can still work out well. For Silver's very last move, I want to give him a big power to show the strength of his psychic abilities, so I give you the Psycho Smash. But, again, changed a little. Firstly, it could only be activated by pressing both triggers at once and spending an entire boost gauge. When activated, it destroys all enemies and physics objects in your Psychokinesis range by pushing them back at full force, and can do massive damage to bosses, while also creating good openings. When picking these, I was mainly working from the angle of making a slightly different style game instead of an almost different genre like with my Knuckles concept. These abilities should be best suited for platforming and simple combat, so let me know what you think of them, because I honestly think there might be more here, but I can't exactly find what I'm thinking of, to be honest with you. Little niches in the detail, things like that. I'm sure there's somebody who can come up with a better idea than this, but it's just what I have for now. But moving on, let's get into what kind of a mess of a story I can cook up for this time-hopping hedgehog. So time travel is hard, but in honor of the human spirit, we endure anyways. Honestly, I kind of want to use this as a chance to kind of resolve some plot discrepancies between a few more minor Sonic characters, specifically Blaze the Cat and Eggman.
The Niggerchin!
You know, I don't want to be a child about it, because we all know what this word sounds like when you don't enunciate it extremely carefully. So when I say Eggman during this segment, just assume I'm talking about this one. We'll move on from there. Back on point. Blaze was really important to Silver during his story in 06, and it really irks me that after her sacrifice, she and Silver just hang out like nothing's up in all the spin-off games. And for Eggman, he's originally from another dimension in the Sonic Rush series, while he's the original Eggman's descendant in the Rivals games. I also want to stress that I didn't want to just do an X-character Generations game like Shadow, but with Silver's backstory as a common time traveler, I do think there's a lot of potential for exploring past villains, locations, and bosses. So I'll try to at least keep it original best as I can. Starting off, I think having Silver act as a kind of paradox resolver, just to give him a bit of agency to the story, would be really useful. Because of this, the inciting incident of the game could be the Time Eater messing with the timeline in some way that creates paradoxes or branching timelines. And Silver would try to fix it by going after it and resolving as many of these paradoxes as he can. Also, a little detail could be that it still has the same appearance from the Supersonic boss fight Generations, just to foreshadow a bit. Even if I think the design is straight up dookie dog water. From here, I can just see Silver exploring old locations, primarily ones related to Blaze's dimension and Silver's future. I think pairing these stages in twos for each timeline he goes through would work best, just to keep things simple and to the point. The starting areas being the first two locations Blaze plays through in the original Sonic Rush game would be a really interesting way of putting the ideas of the story into the level design itself. Silver could start his journey in the same place Blaze starts her story, so the first level would be Night Carnival, which I think could go mostly unchanged. The second level I want to be Water Palace, because it's really an iconic set location from the Rush games. And it can be used as a twist where instead it'll be Sand Palace, replacing the rushing water with shifting sand. After these two, some story narrative aspects could cause a time shift to Tropical Jungle, but in Silver's original future, so it's covered in fire and burnt down flora. Then a straight up just classic Crisis City, pretty much as is. Not much to say for this one, really. Now, before the final two areas, Silver could have a confrontation with the Time Eater, revealing that Eggman was controlling it this entire time. And finally, taking Silver to his new base on Pirates Island in Blaze's dimension. After destroying the base, Eggman and Silver could both escape and begin a race to the Soul Emeralds of this dimension located in the Soul Empire, the final stage of the game. Here, Silver could finally meet with Blaze, who, despite neither of them remembering their time together, I assume Blaze could still probably feel his noble intentions, and at the very least see him as an ally who knows what Eggman is truly capable of. The Soul Empire would be an all-new stage, so I'm not really sure how it would entirely function, but I'll just leave that up to your imagination. We only have like a couple official screenshots of like art, I think, that Blaze is in that show it. And last, I had like a big Super Silver battle at the very end, using the Soul Emeralds to transform with the help of Blaze, because as I've said previously, I'm a big sucker for these final super battles. And to finally wrap up and put a nice little bow on this story, I'd just like to see Blaze and Silver acknowledge each other in some way, as a kind of hint that they may grow closer as friends like they were before. The glimpse of a blooming friendship really does feel like a great way to end Silver's story, because as far as we know, he doesn't have that many close friends in his time. He's practically alone. Alright, and with all that timey-wimey nonsense, I'm ready to jump into our last game, featuring Metal Sonic. Metal Sonic is a badass robot copy of the main character. What is there to not childishly soy jack at? Well, his story, except a few exceptions, can be quite lacking at points, I'll admit. His first appearance gives him a good hype up, but kind of fumbles it at the end, with him just being another midpoint boss, which isn't bad, but as a kid I always just kind of expected more of him. Luckily, in Sonic Heroes, he gets to take the main stage as the sole villain of the game, with some awesome new transformations on top of it. Unluckily, after that, it was all just midpoint flunky gigs for my poor Steel child again, for the longest time. So here, I really want to focus on feeling like a mechanical beast trying to get better and stronger to finally fulfill your purpose. And for this section, I'll try to find the best way to show that through gameplay. So for Metal, he's obviously going to have to be very similar to baseline Sonic gameplay with boost, homing attack, and all that. Given the main differentiating ability we see Metal use a handful of times, I really want to focus on that for his main gimmick, transformations. Transforming into different forms with unique abilities would be a really fun way of incorporating his ability to modify himself, and could be based on him wanting to incorporate parts of other machines into his own power set. Pretty much think of him as Mega Man, but move lay fast. Just for some basic examples from moves he's already shown using is his Overdrive, where he can enter an invincible state, but he moves slower, requires 20 rings to enter, and it drains his rings as he's using it. Another one would be a Plasma Pulse, where he fires an energy blast that acts like Shadow's Chaos Spear. The unique transformation ability can be mapped to X, and selecting your transformation could be done by holding left trigger for a wheel to pop up on the screen. I feel like this is the best way of simplifying it, so it's not too overly intrusive. This transformation ability would also be a great way for the player to customize their playstyle with the abilities they like using the most, while also be able to diversify the level design for different paths equated for different forms you can take. Getting the new transformations, I think, would be best as just as scripted sections in the levels or story, such as at X point in the level, you'll unlock the ability to skim on water or something. I also would like it and think it'd be really cool if after defeating each boss, you could incorporate the boss's power, giving you a transformation that would make you similar to them. I feel like this is just the best way to keep everything simple without having to make it too difficult. Like, I toyed with the idea of being able to copy, kind of like Kirby does, being able to copy an enemy on the stage. But I feel like that just makes its control scheme too complicated. And this is a good way to keep it simple and giving you enough powers that it feels like you have a vast array of abilities while still keeping it minimal enough that we can make sure they're all well fleshed out in and of themselves. I do also want to say that I imagine this could be potentially kind of broken or even buggy with ability cooldown times and switching in and out of forms to cheese. But that's more minute, like programming details, and I'm definitely not worried about that kind of stuff. That's why I'm making a video and not programming. Now, again, with me talking about bosses and their abilities, I'll like to go ahead and talk about the plot of this Metal Sonic game. As I've said previously, I wanted this game to really focus on making the player feel like they're playing as a mechanical villain bent on defeating their arch rival. To this end, in the story, I'd like to use this inspiration for Metal Sonic to sort of break free of Eggman's control in order to get stronger on his own terms. This could involve Metal collecting all the Chaos Emeralds after Eggman manages to actually find them all before getting Sonic's attention. All this to say that now Metal has an excuse to blast through Eggman's different bases, beat up previous or upgraded bosses, and collect the emeralds for ultimate power. Now, for each boss coming up, I want to have a mix of new ideas and remixes of old bosses. I also tried looking for areas Eggman has already been shown to have control over to use the different stages for the game. Starting off with a new boss and a new location, I wanted to keep some series staples such as a grassy starting area, so I propose a forest factory where badniks could be mass produced. This would be a fun location to establish your abilities against some more simple enemies, and for the boss here, I really like the idea of a bossnik, I guess. To be honest, I mostly just thought the name was funny, and the idea of a leader of goofy robots as a tutorial would work really well. For its ability that Metal Sonic collects afterwards, I think causing all badniks around you to immediately become non-hostile would be a good play on the boss's own natural abilities, and it could also possibly help the player when platforming by putting enemies back to their stationary positions, so it'd be easier to do like a homing attack chain. Next, I'd like to hop into some more legacy stages, so a return to Stardust Speedway would be really cool, since it's the first main area that Metal Sonic really gets to shine. And like the plot reason I have for it not being on Little Planet is that it's a recreation of Stardust Speedway Eggman has created specifically to test robots meant to destroy Sonic, considering it's a long racetrack. I figured it would make sense, to test something that's supposed to kill a fast-moving target on a racetrack. And it would make sense for our villain of this area, Mecha Sonic. Now, this is again going to be more Sonic fan service stuff. This entire video is Sonic fan service. I don't even know why I feel the need to include the disclaimer anymore. But having the newest Mecha Sonic mark or model would be really cool. I think it would be Mark IV at this point. This fight could reflect Metal Sonic's first fight with Sonic in the series, but now it's to decide which of the bots is best suited to beat Sonic himself. This model of the Mecha Sonic series could be more based on the use of Chaos Energy, since the second model could enter a super form, and Eggman focuses on the power of the emeralds more than anything, really. So for Metal's transformation ability here, it would be really cool if he just gains the ability to use a short facsimile of Chaos Control by using up to 10 rings. This could just be something like Chaos Snap, but Metal just auto-homing attacks the nearest enemy or string of enemies. Just keep it simple and easy. From here, we can move on to another known location with Iron Jungle as a weapons cache, which could be full of old robots from the games or scrapped prototypes. Here, the player would fight an unstable recreation of Gemerald, I think is how you pronounce it, who combines with all the other old untouched tech in the base. This boss could just give the ability to absorb a homing attack targeted enemy and gain even more boost gauge meter out of it, but it wouldn't drop anything else. And I know it's a bit simple, but some of these are best as simple just to make it easier and make it more fun to explore new areas. Now moving into the latter half of the game, Metal could break into Hidden Base and collect an emerald and try to get close to Eggman's base location. As stated in the Dark Beginnings animation for Shadow Generations, Hidden Base is just a weapons depot at this point in the story, so it'd be full of battle-ready robots. Here I'd like the boss to be a sequel to the E100 series and call it something like E200 or whatever. It's more just meant to be a culmination of the E series more than anything. I just think it'd be really fun to make it a massive artillery unit firing cannons, guns, bombs, just making it a really hard boss to approach from long range, but once you get in, it can't really do much to defend itself. And the ability gained from here could just be a big artillery attack that shoots down all enemies on screen. This would be really excellent for combat, but it could also cut you off from certain paths. So if you destroyed enemies in a homing attack chain with this, you would automatically be left off that path. Now, using Hidden Base to go airborne, Metal can now enter the Egg Fleet, where Eggman has been testing on creating his own Wisp, or form of Wisp energy. This could be explained in the lore as just the higher atmosphere being better environments for them, or something pseudo-scientific like that. I don't know if I actually want to include any Wisp powers up here, because I'm kind of sick of them, to be honest with you. Because I just really feel like they've been used up too much since Sonic Colors, and they don't really feel special anymore. But if you'd like them, just imagine them in the game here, and if you don't, imagine them not being here. However, I do want to bring back from Sonic Colors the boss for this stage, which instead of the Wisp armor is going to be the Mecha Wisp armor. This variation is going to use the artificial Wisp energy created here as a fuel source instead of like normal Wisp. I imagine this armor using similar moves to its predecessors, but instead it's more based on chasing down the player, since the White Wisp are probably the easiest to recreate than the more abnormal Wisp abilities. Also, having it have some attacks similar to the Wisp that came after Colors would also be a cool reference to make it more unique, but also using established Wisp abilities to make the fight just stand more on its own. And the boss ability from the Mecha Wisp armor could be an extra boost bar used for your ability button instead of the normal boost, which would give you a shorter boost, but it's supposed to be more useful like in midair to redirect yourself more than boosting on the ground. Either way, it's good for movement, that kind of thing. It's a let go fast button again. And for our last main level, I would like to see another interpretation of Chemical Plant. I know it's almost as overplayed as Green Hill at this point, but I'm currently writing this with blue screen-killed eyes, so fuck, I don't care. I just love the music in this level. Leave me alone! The main change here, since metal is made of metal, the water would act as an instant kill zone without a water transformation. This could be anything like a water skimmer or submarine, really, and it would still work. And for the last normal boss, I would like to see a chimera of all the old Eggman mechs left as a kind of guard dog for Eggman's current base. So in my mind, this Egg Chimera is a mix of Egg Dragoon, Egg Robo, Egg Emperor, and other kinds of mechs like that. To just pick one of the myriad abilities it could have for the copy ability, I think giving Metal Sonic a shield form that can parry attacks would make a really good defensive move, considering a lot of the other abilities are more offensive or speed-based. Finally, getting into the last level here, it's just going to be the latest attempt at constructing Eggman Land. Due to this, expect a bunch of construction equipment similar to Planet Wisp from Colors or the old Eggman Land from Unleashed. Here you can collect the final emerald and clash with Eggman in his newest mech. I think it'd be a fun play for the story if this mech is powered by Sonic in some way. It could be either that he was captured and Metal would have to free him to fulfill his mission, or if the stages he was running through were storing his speed, or whatever non-pseudo-scientific explanation would work. In this fight, Metal would have a chance to use the Chaos Emeralds to enter a super state, or something similar to it for him. I don't want it to just be Neo Metal or Madness Overlord again. And the IDW comics have shown Neo Metal going super, so surely Base Metal can go super too. And to finally wrap up the story, after all this, I would just like to have Metal run off, but Eggman could promise to enhance his abilities even further to heighten his chances even more. And I really just want to end it with the hopes of an even stronger Metal Sonic boss fight sometime in the future. I just really think this is the best way to end the story while still keeping it satisfying for the narrative and for the player. Alright, and that is all 3 of the fanfiction Sonic games I had come up with. Whew boy, that was long, and recording wise at least. I don't know how long the video is going to turn out. Probably an hour, if even, to be honest with you. Yeah, but it was a good time. I had a lot of fun coming up with these ideas. to be honest, I really just played Shadow Generations. It was like, what if they did this for everyone? And I realized that's pretty unrealistic because what are you going to make a goddamn Amy Rose game about? You know? So I just tried to pick 3 characters who I think would do best with their own solo games. They're not my 3 favorite characters, I'll say. Like, I really like Tails, but I don't feel like Tails is a lot of... Well, Tails has potential for his own game, but nothing that interesting, you know? I don't feel like I have a lot of ideas. I can imagine how he would move and how he would play, but, like, story-wise, I don't think there'd be much to talk about there. But I feel like with Knuckles, Silver, and Metal, there's enough potential in both gameplay and story differences to really make it a unique package overall. So I went ahead and brainrod this little idea out for you. So I hope you enjoy it. Sorry if I really do sound gruff in this recording. I don't know what it was. I came up with something in my throat. Allergies, I guess. I don't know. But it's been rough. I want to get this video out soon, so I hope my sacrifice isn't in vain, and I hope you still had a good enough time. If you like any of these ideas, please, tell me what you think in the comments. If you have your own ideas for how, if you think I did something wrong, like you don't think a character would work some kind of way, or I probably got some kind of lore wrong in the Silver section. That was a mess. I deep dive the wiki articles to try and figure out how that story worked. But if there's anything you would do for these characters, or even how you would make your own Sonic side character game, please let me know. I'd love to see it. I think it'd be so cool to see what other people would do for other characters. I definitely feel like there's a lot of potential with a lot of the Sonic casts to have their own kind of games. Like, I feel like you could make a whole Chaotix game all over again. It would be a whole different kind of beast. But it was a lot of fun coming up with the gameplay, story, and the art. I have fun little art if you want to see any of it. I had the speed draws on here if you want to see any of the original art in its finished form. You can go ahead and find it on my Twitter, Newgrounds. I'll have it in the description somewhere. You'll be able to find it. I'll try to make sure of that. But I think that's all I have for now. So if you'd like, you can do all the funny little YouTube stuff. The likes, comments, subscriptions, whatnot and whatnot. But outside that, I don't know. I'm just happy you enjoyed the video, if you did. And if you didn't, please let me know what you think I could have done better. And I'll try to improve in the future. I try to strive to be better. So, with all that being said, I think I'm done here. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is for you. And I hope you'll join me again in the next little video I make. So, I'll see you.